if you think of health span, what's your work span? Like how effective can you be? Everybody's like, I worked an 80-hour week, but you're like, did you actually put out 80 hours of good effort? Welcome back to Founder Mode.
Where we go behind the grind with real conversations for founders and operators that are building the future.
Yeah, today's just the two of us, no guests, no filter.
We're diving into why health isn't an individual sport anymore. It's about community, shared rituals, and designing environments that keep us in the game longer. Health is about community and not just willpower, right? Like it's this shared experience that you look at the healthiest people in the world. It's not that they eat better or don't drink or don't smoke, like the Italians in Sardinia or whatever that live 100 years. And there's just a deep community there, right?
Yeah, and I think it's funny because like the first sort of experience that I had with this was 15 some years ago. Was at CrossFit, and CrossFit was all about the gym and like exactly. It was kind of weird because I was like, man, I really liked that thing, and I couldn't figure out like. And we used to joke in the morning. This was when I was building a Comply, and it was like, man, the hardest part of your day is over, right? By ripping that first hour in the morning, and it was a crazy workout. And I've been collecting a bunch of these sort of like different kinds of PRs or metrics, and
for 10
trying to track
years.
them. But I'm curious, like I know you built this big assessment thing like recently in chat. Like what did that look like for you, and what were the kinds of things that popped up?
Yeah, I've been doing my ChatGPT workouts for a while, and I was like, I probably need to like re-baseline. And so I told Chat like, hey, give me an assessment I can run through. And it actually took me a couple different workouts to get all the data to input because I just didn't have the time. And so I worked through like all these different exercises, deadlifts, bench press, running, like max distance. I did like a proxy for VO2 max on a rower and like just a bunch of stuff, and gave it all that data back and said like, restate the goals that I have and give me like a plan that's going to continue to move us towards these goals. And it's pretty cool. I mean, I'm only like 1 week into having made that kind of adjustment, but my concern was like, I'm just going along with this thing over time indefinitely and just having it spit out new workouts. And I feel like I'm not feeding enough data back into the system, right? But our second episode, I think, was about health and hustle. And so this kind of episode, the two of us, I feel like is going to go deep in this area again. And the question, Kevin, is like, well, you're a founder. Why should you care about this? And I think it's obvious to us, but I don't know if it is obvious to people. Curious how you to early founders, like folks that are just starting to build, maybe they're younger than us too. What should they know, right? That the reason why are we talking about this?
No, because we're older. I think to me, like, again, I know there's like you've hit these points of burnout in building things. And I think, there's this kind of the Chinese 996, you're like working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And I think that works. And I think there were days where we were doing the like 8 to midnight, 7 days a week or whatever. And I remember vividly sleeping under like a desk or like crashed in the office, all night. And I know also looking back that the things I worked on back at those days, I was writing code, like the code I wrote after 10 p.m. was definitely not as good as the code before. And now I even think like anything past 8 p.m. is not as good or 6 p.m. So like, to me, it's like, well, how do you get the maximum amount of like effective work? And then how do you stay healthy and not get sick? Like you'd have these, we'd get sick for a longer time.
All
and
the
even
time
being
because
younger,
you're working.
if you think of health span, what's your work span? Like how effective can you be? Everybody's like, I worked an 80-hour week, but you're like, did you actually put out 80 hours of good effort?
Yeah,
Probably
that
not.
sleep score and like the readiness scores are the new flex, right? Because like I'm going to do efficient work today because I actually took care of myself, right?
Yeah.
And so coming back to this idea of community, like there's a way to find people, like even if you're doing 996, there are ways now to find your people, right? To like connect with folks in the community. And, you and I both are into this like health and wellness culture. Talk about the places where you could just show up and just kind of have built-in community there around you.
There's a lot of places you can just show up, right? There's work, these co-working places, there's fitness, there's gyms, whatever.
Yeah.
I think for me, traveling a lot and having busy schedules, like love the idea of having an app that I can go set up a class and be like, or schedule something where it's like, oh, I'm going to go to Barry's, or I'm going to go to do this, workout at other ship or whatever. And it's like, oh, this is my people there. And I always joke, like, I wish there was an app, like it's almost back to the old Meetup app or Meetup site that I think still exists, where it's like, how do I just find like a cool pickleball crew to go with and just be able to like jump in and rip it and be like, there's other things I think that I would love to see. I think there's these, it's actually, I think it's one in New York now, but there's a bunch down in SoCal, like Therabody put together these resets. It's like a small kind of pop up where it's like cryotherapy, red light, whatever. And a lot of those are what I would describe as solo missions. It's kind of like going to one of these IV clinics or something, or drip clinics where you're like, hey, you go and get your IV. It's very much you. Like, yeah, you could go with friends, but to me, it's finding these ones where it's like, oh, you're doing stuff that's fun, you're doing stuff that's together, and again, in a healthy way, right? You're eating healthy stuff, you're doing healthy workouts, whatever, and you're like increasing your lifespan. Where I think, the kind of the old culture of like finding communities, like you go to a bar, people are smoking, less so now, probably more in New York than in the Bay Area, which is crazy. But, and then, just drinking and things like that, where it's like, how do you find ways that are like kind of opt in or sort of select in? But the trend or the health span sort of happiness thing is not too obsessed, but at least
Yeah.
aligned with what you want to be.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like we're in this culture where, it's like heads down, just me doing my thing, and like you can very easily just be blinders on and not really engage with anyone around you. Like if you want to, especially living in a place like New York, like you could just kind of go out of your apartment or whatever and into your office and back into your apartment every day. And so like how do you show up in the world like Other Ship, Alchemy Springs, these are cool places to kind of meet people and get out of that routine a little bit and build routines that are also happen to be good for you. The other places that for me that I think are interesting, and we talk about this, is like, you're kind of nomadic, you travel a lot. I have this like country club down the street, like, go and kind of work offsite at the club because we both, work from home or wherever, whatever hotel we're in at any given time, right? And some people like, go to other kind of community places. It's basically like making sure that you are looking after yourself so that you're not just like sitting hunched over your computer, your laptop alone for 12 hours a day staring into a screen, and I think there's
Yeah.
there's some value there, right?
Yeah. And I think to me, like, again, like at least my like mom or parents' generation, like, they found church, or they had like their,
Yeah.
the school community, the PTA or something. And I think while those things exist, that fabric is not the same. I mean, and again, I think there's parts of the US and definitely parts of the world where that sort of fabric's well built. But I think this kind of like tech first digital thing, and whether it's even nomadic or just like the busyness of like sort of like modern life,
Yeah.
has drawn a lot of people away from some of those sort of traditional community sort of environments.
Yeah, I agree, and coming back to, like, the whole 996 and hustle culture, I saw somebody tweeted the other day that, like, if you're talking about it, you're probably not actually doing that, right? Like, the people that are actually doing
Yeah.
true 996 are just
Yeah.
grinding, and they're not tweeting,
They
and
probably
so
don't have a Twitter account, let's be
yeah, no,
honest.
they
Or
deleted
or
it
or not
from their
one that they
phone.
post on.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
they're, like, super locked in and focused.
No, I think there's truth to that. I think the cool thing about it is like, is like as you build these modern companies now, I know you guys are mostly remote. We're sort of pretty remote. We have like a couple co-working spaces, like one in the city,
Yeah.
and we have another one down in the South Bay. So like, and then we have some people that just like full-time work at home. And I think this idea of having sort of like some like lightweight base touches, it's almost like kind of WeWork-ish, like in the way we've kind of set up our company, allows people to get together when they want to, but not forced to be. I think works. And if people want to do 996 and grind and kind of live in there, that's great. But I don't think that, again, I don't think that you're going to get the best sort of
No, it's
output
not good
if you're
output.
not balancing it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And, I think people are there's an obsession with, like, the concept of an overnight success, right? And it's like nobody sees the, like, years and years of hard work, and I think what you and I just talk about a lot is, like, what does actually working hard look like, and how do you shape it that allows you to work not just hard, but smart? And, I'd be interesting to see because like post COVID, remote work definitely normalized, and there's the big RTO movement. The startups that I work with that do remote well, they make sure that there's these like tent pole moments for the team to all get together, like once a quarter, once a month, like everybody's showing up in a space and collaborating, but then going back to their remote spaces. And then what we're kind of saying is like you still need to augment that with some kind of additional community outside of your job. Like don't just like work doesn't have to be your life. Like I have two little kids. Like I am you'll call me sometimes it'll be 3 o'clock and like I'm on school pickup, right? And it's like you hear and you're like, oh, the full team's there. You're like, I gotta go. And so like it's fine. But I think making space and making time to show up in your life is not a bad thing. And it's not like something where it's like, oh yeah, you're not working hard. So you did a kind of interesting experiment the other day you told me about where you kind of went fully off grid to go like run an errand. Talk about what you did.
Yeah. So one of my cars is not a Tesla. And so it's not like connected. It's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of a dumb car. It's still cool, but like, it doesn't have like the connective, whatever the
No
connectivity plans.
CarPlay, no nothing. Yeah.
It has CarPlay actually, but it doesn't have like the connectiveness because it's
Yeah.
like, it
It's
expired.
old.
It's a 10-year-old car.
Yeah.
But I left the house with just the key actually.
Physical
And
key.
I didn't take my phone because I was like, oh, I'm just going to run this like thing. I had to go to the store and pick something up and come back. And then for whatever reason, I left my phone, and I'm weird about like charging. I have all these devices like my Whoop, my like thing. And I'd taken all of my watch and everything off to charge.
Fun aside, one time Kevin opened his backpack and took out his charging setup that like goes on the desk, and every cable is perfectly tie wrapped. Oh, you have it right there. You have to
Yeah.
show it. It
He
is
knows. I'm grabbing.
it is the most organized thing I've ever seen. That is it. That there needs to be a founder mode just dedicated to like cable management. My
Yeah.
wife and I always joke about like teaching a college class called printers and cables, but like that's ultimate cable management right there. So you had the whole thing set up and everything was charging. So
So it
you
was
were
everything
sensorless.
was charging. And I was like, like it's fine. I'm just going to be gone for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
And I got in the car, no GPS, no like map. I mean, luckily I knew where I was going because normally I'm like look at an auto map thing and FSD, and then that thing figures the rest out. And I was like 10 minutes in the drive, I was like, bro, this is kind of cool. Like there's no thing, like the radio was off. There's no Spotify. It only had AM radio because it doesn't have my phone. So, and I was like, nothing's on. I'm just like, kind of cool. I walked into the store, bought like some gum and like a thing of milk, which was what I was actually going to get. And I realized I didn't have my phone.
So you had to pay with
And
an
I'm
actual
like,
like credit card or cash or something.
yeah. And then I'm like, I had to pull out my wallet and pay with a credit card. And I was like, okay, that's not Apple Pay. And as I was walking out of the store into the car, I'm just like, oh, this is interesting. Nobody's interrupted me. Nobody's called.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, kind of crazy. So whatever. So I get home, 10 minutes later, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And so I was like, man, I should do this more often. And it was crazy that same night I went to this like health kind of like wellness sort of talk with a bunch of doctors. And one of the doctors said something that was almost similar where he's like, he was an ER doc, and he said, I had my best and quietest shift a couple weeks ago. And he's like, what happened was when I came into work, I thought I turned on the phone and I actually turned it off. And he's like, it was weird because like, I'm halfway through my 10-hour shift. And he's like, nobody's interrupted me. Nobody's called on my thing. I've never got paged. He's like, a few people came into the room and asked me a question or found me and chased me down. But he's like, when I got at the end of the shift, I went to turn my thing off and turned on. And I was like, oh. So he had literally had his kind of phone and his like work pager off the whole shift. And he was like, and so there was this whole, so kind of those two things connected this notion of like, is there a lesson in like, kind of being sensorless or techless and just kind of walking away and the kind of the quiet walk in the park or whatever,
So they're
they
in
wouldn't
our
have a
life.
battery. They,
Yeah.
they would have a cable, right? They were
Yeah.
plugged in. I mean, the original cell phone was plugged into your car. It was a
Yeah.
car phone, not a cell phone, but
Yeah.
I don't know. You had a cool story. We were talking about this before the
Yeah.
show a little bit and like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so I got the
different.
first I've had basically every Apple Watch, every generation, so I was one of the first early adopters of the Gen 1 Apple Watch, and I went on, a date with my now wife. Our first date, I had the Apple Watch on, and we met up at a bar. We sit down and we're talking, and I'm getting the push notifications on the watch, and, I do the, like, turn to look at it, and it was the second or third time I did that, and she goes, "If you do that again, I'm gonna throw it in your drink." And I was like, I like this lady.
Yeah,
She's
it's good.
she's fierce, but like she's right. And it's so, this distraction economy that we live in and like the importance of being present. And I know you have your phone on DND all the time, which I think is amazing. And there's some workarounds to get your attention, but it's like it's a good reminder that like maybe, like people have cheat days for their diet. Like what's the cheat day, the opposite of that for your your digital detox? Is there one day a week? Can you do a Sunday or a few hours on a Sunday, like where you're just like, yeah, I'm going fully off the grid.
Yeah,
And
and you've
like,
heard of
is
like
yeah,
these silent retreats or silent
yeah,
meditation where it's like
or
go for
Vipassana.
3 to 7 days. It's like
Yeah,
super hard and like people really
yeah,
freak out. And
yeah.
but I think there's a version that's probably less than that that would actually be healthy for a lot of people. And like I said, I enjoyed it.
One is analog friction like this new luxury? There's all these dumb phones coming out that can only make
Yeah,
calls and like,
yeah.
text message, right? Like, is that
Kind of a good like break because it's just too easy. Right? Literally carrying my phone to go wherever, and you're like, it's just too quick to swipe it open, check a message, open something up, and go from there.
yeah, no, I think we need to find healthy ways to interact with our devices for sure. We talked about this kind of like showing up for the family, being present in your community, in your life versus the 996 culture, like kind of pulling it all together and also looking ahead to the future with kind of AI disrupting everything, more and more wearables coming out all the time and tech. Like, let's go to the next phase. You had done a little bit of research on like this biohacker world and things that people are doing. You
Yeah,
went down that rabbit hole?
it was funny because we were prepping for this and we are like, oh, okay, cool. We do this like contrast therapy or these kind of like
Yeah. We're so we're
I
so
wear
on the edge. Oh,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
not.
And I was like, what's the most extreme version of this?
Yeah.
And man, like there is like these, they call them grinds, like grindhouse and this kind of like gen space thing in the lab and this like cyberpunk science dungeon. I mean, some of the names are just intense, but there are these places where, people are really taking this kind of to the next level of like, you know, both pushing the edge of science. And I think there's two things that are interesting. I think one is people are doing a lot of self experimentation, which I think is, super cool. I think the other one is, where I've seen this actually happen with like friends or close or family type things where like you run into like a really bad disease or a rat issue. And like the only way is to kind of get into a clinical trial or take some of these
Yep.
extreme things.
Right.
And I think the interesting piece is that cross section of like doing that because it's like you're backed into a corner and like science hasn't found the answer to this. So you're willing to take crazy risks. Now saying with like, there's this thing and people are doing medical tourism where they're leaving the country going to Mexico, going to sort of some of these outreach islands where they're like setting up these clinics outside of the US to avoid sort of like regulation. And I think that's an interesting thing, but to me it was somewhat enlightening because I kind of thought of myself as a pretty early adopter of some of these
Yeah.
things, that there was actually an
But
edge
like,
out there
would
that was
would you
farther.
implant like tech into your body? What's the bar that it has to like clear for you to be like, yeah, I'm gonna put that thing inside of me?
Yeah, I mean, so clearly I use a CGM, so like
Yeah.
in theory that's injected into my body, like it's kind of like
Minimally
think
invasive.
minimally invasive. But to me, like I kind of had thought of it, it's like it's not, is it not banned? Or is it like the FDA approved it? And so like I try to get detail more, what's the risk of this and how like speculative and sort of risky is it? And I mean, I use Chat GPT and to quite frankly figure a lot of this out because it's like, I don't know. One of them for me was like I've had this like shoulder thing that I've been fighting for a few
Right.
months now, of like shoulder injury, and it just like again just a workout thing. I like say, man, I did some physical therapy, couldn't figure it out, and some friends were like, oh, you should go try peptides, and I'm like, all right, what's that? Like, what are, started to do some research into it, and I was like, man, there's some people that have had some really bad reactions to that. And like the science is like interesting and working, but there's also like it's still pretty unproven and pretty speculative. And so, you know, I'm definitely doing things that I would say that you go to your doctor and be like, hey, I'm doing all these blood tests or I'm checking all these things. Interesting. But I still think that like the safety bar there is still
Pretty high.
there's a pretty good buffer in terms of what I'm down to do. I think my sense is like, would you go stick a Neuralink or would you do
Yeah.
something like that?
I
At
mean, I
what
think if I
level of
was a
like
quadriplegic,
comfort?
probably, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Like
like, if I
what
can't
level do you have to be at? Yeah.
if I can't do anything, it's kinda like, do you participate in a clinical trial if you're, like, late stage something versus early stage, right? So,
Right.
I
And is
think
it
that
a nice
yeah,
to have versus like, is it like it's required to sort of
yeah,
solve
I
like a
need
pain
to
or problem?
live, and this is the only way to do it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. So you talked about using ChatGPT to kind of interrogate some of these things. You've come up with this pretty good idea that you've shown me around developing, board of directors for decision making, and you have like this board of directors for your health now. Talk about how you've set that up.
Yeah, so I mean, again, everybody's got their like, amazing prompt for chat. And the thing that I stumbled onto this of like somebody had written like this council sort of approach. I was like, oh, that's interesting, this council. And I was like, oh, it's kind of like a board of directors. And so I was like, well, board of directors is interesting because like if you imagine like in a company's sake, they'll have like 5 people, 7 people, 13, if it's bigger, whatever. And they each have their own experiences and expertise. And so I was like, well, if I'm thinking about my health, like I want somebody that's interested in like, you know, exercise, somebody that's interested in longevity, somebody that's interested in like cardiac experts for like heart, somebody that's interested in like men's health, somebody that's interested in like all these things and saying like, who would be like a world renowned expert to have on your panel? So you basically add enough context, these are some of the basic stats about me. And then I want you to act as a council of experts. Here's the 5 sort of personas or 7 personas that I want you to be. And then I want like a moderator or final person to end up saying like, oh, they have consensus. Like everybody
Yeah.
agrees you should eat more vegetables and walk, move a lot,
But
you
they
know.
debate as a group about what is the right answer.
Right. And so peptides is the great one. If you say, hey, what's peptides? And they're like, hey, well, honest. So GLP-1s are a version of peptides. And they're like, oh, well, the GLP-1s are a thing, but they're like, you're 48, you don't have weight issues. So like, it's probably not a candidate. We all agree that it's okay, but we also all agree that you probably aren't a good candidate for it. And they're like, these other ones are sort of more speculative. Like there's evidence that it could be helpful, but there's also a lot of evidence that it's been problematic for people. Right. And so I think for me, it to me, like when you ask ChatGPT, it's like Wikipedia. It like
Yeah.
kind of like
Just spits
just
it out.
gives you like a lot of descriptions. It's not contextually relevant. Where this council of experts is like, oh, here's the thing. Here's how it could or couldn't apply to your situation. And here's what we recommend. And then you can quickly see like, oh, okay, does everybody agree? Or like, hey, if you're trying to achieve this or that, maybe that's okay. But there's like, here's the concerns that the group had, and you get this kind of summary discussion, which I found, yeah, to just make a lot of the questions that I asked. And I've kind of built this for business stuff. I built this
Yeah.
for
You can
health,
apply it to more than just health. Yeah.
a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
love
so
it.
it lets you to kind of come up with like, if you were to be able, the old joke is like, hey, can you ask your smartest friend? And they're like, ChatGPT is like your smartest friend. And you're like, well, what if you could ask, if like, for example, I have a marketing question, like I'm going to ask Jason because like Jason's like done all this marketing, has a ton of research there where, if I'm going to ask a technical question, I may ask JJ, who's like, I've worked with on a bunch of stuff, who's like done a bunch of AI stuff. Right. And so I think finding and being able to not think of ChatGPT as a generalist, but now thinking of it as like a group of experts to me has been pretty
When we
impactful.
had the episode with Chris Winfield, he talked about,
Yeah.
call Steve Jobs, right? Like you can
Right.
even
Simplify.
assign your board of directors, people living or dead, that you like their point of view and you want that on your council or your board. So I like that.
Top 5, a community first wellness. Think, othership, Myo, sort of this boosts consistency, but also accountability, kind of having shared routines. The shift of training focus from like this kind of PRs to more longevity metrics. Now, this optimized work span, not hours, like these late night work, kind of degrades the quality in your health. And then just finding a way to take breaks, periodic sensor and sort of tech, sort of pause, right? Whether it's the, go drive your dumb car, offline sessions, improved clarity, recovery. And then really just this notion of using AI as a council of experts to sort of evaluate interventions, avoid speculation, and then really high risk hacks without strong evidence, maybe something you don't want to do. And then also sort of discover things and have like different perspectives sort of summarized and sort of presented you in a smart way.
Yeah. So that's it for this episode of Founder Mode. If you got value from the conversation, I know I did, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share. We'll leave all that cool prompt that Kevin has for his board of directors in the show notes. Please give us your feedback. This is how we keep growing and bring you unfiltered conversations for builders like you.
Remember, what you build will only last as long as you do.